The Three-Body Problem series, or Remembrance of Earth's Past Trilogy, tackles bleak possibilities with very real problems. The Three-Body Problem, the first book in the series, takes its namesake from an unsolvable real-world problem embedded in chaos. The second book, The Dark Forest, gives a horrifying solution to why we can't find life elsewhere in the galaxy. And the final book, Death's End, refers not just to the death of an individual or group, but of something much more terrifying than can be imagined. The series offers existential dread and cosmic horror on a scale rarely seen, and the cruelty of this universe doesn't come from malice or hate or body horror, but pure cosmic indifference. Humanity is nothing but bugs skittering helplessly away in the shadow of time. And I crashed out at the very end of this series. Hi folks, Norman here. Once again, you honor me by allowing me to accompany you as you eat your food, do your chores, or possibly be on your TV, the highest honor. But today's video will be a bit different. I would describe much of what I do as thoughtfully researched, but this one's going to be a little different. The big spoiler warning right here. I will be spoiling the entire series. So if it's on your radar, read it first. Also, this will not be some type of comprehensive analysis of the elements of the story, nor an eloquent retelling of them. So if you want that, go check out Quinn's ideas if you haven't already. I will probably do a big breakdown or analysis of the entire trilogy, but we are talking about like a 3 to 5 hour video, and I gotta talk about this right now. Also, so whatever title or thumbnail I post makes sense, the paperback copies of all these books have a quote from Obama that simply says, "Wildly imaginative." Thanks, Obama. Now, let's get into a
Inaccurate.
summary of the Three-Body Problem series. The Three-Body Problem, Book 1, starts during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Also worth mentioning now is that the author Cixin Liu, or Liu Cixin, not really sure how to say that because Chinese people have the surname first. I'll figure it out for the big video, but he's Chinese. Not Chinese American or whatever, but actually Chinese. And just for everyone who has no idea what the Chinese Cultural Revolution was, because you haven't really studied Chinese history because you're a Western dog or whatever, well, the best equivalent is to think of like the Civil War or maybe the French Revolution. Also, because I know someone's going to go into the comments to elaborate, the Cultural Revolution wasn't a civil war because it was state-sponsored and they already had that. There really isn't a Western equivalent to what it was. You just need to know it was a bad time. Anyways, enter our first big character, Ye Wenji, who witnesses her father, who is a big science man, get brutally murdered by a bunch of teenagers caught up in the revolution. Because science bad. Wenji is also a big science girl, but instead of being killed, she gets sent to a labor camp to become a depressed lumberjack. Then she gets recruited by some political party people to work at this super secret radar base called Red Coast Base. Because they knew she was a big science girl, and most science people are scared to step up because they don't want to get murderized. The real secret is that the base is meant to be used to try and find and communicate with extraterrestrials so that China can get some sweet alien tech so they can win an international game of Risk. The problem is that the radio waves sent by the station are really wimpy and don't get very far out into the galaxy. But Wenji figures out that she can use the sun as a Gold's gem for radio waves to make buff radio waves that go much further. It still takes a long time, however, and it's 8 years before they get a response from an extraterrestrial race that says, "Hey girl, don't pick up the phone." Wenji, however, is a big science girl boss who doesn't like her housemates anymore because they killed her dad and wrecked the house, and she's like, "Nah, it would be better if y'all just came and took over the house because you'd probably take better care of it." The house, in this terrible analogy, is the Earth. Time passes and China reforms and ends the culture war and says science is okay now, I guess, but Wenji is still pretty bummed about her dad. She then meets a rich American named Mike Evans, slumming it out in rural China, who likes ugly birds for some reason, and who also doesn't like his roommates because they don't like his ugly birds and they also keep trashing the house. They bond over ugly birds and hating their roommates and wonder how they can kick out their roommates. And Wenji decides to tell Mike about her super duper secret that the abandoned house next door actually has super cool, super smart aliens in it, and they should phone them up to come kick out their roommates. Unfortunately, they don't have a giant radar dish to ring up their alien homies, and Mike says, "I'm rich. I do what I want." And he uses his vast wealth to build a boat phone. And by boat phone, I mean an oil tanker with a radar dish on top of it. So Wenji and Mike phone the aliens and tell them to come on over. They also find out there's a lot of other people in the world who also hate their housemates. In the real world, they're apparently called environmentalists. They decide that they should make a club, and they call it the ETO, which stands for Earth Trisolarian Organization. Trisolarians are what they call the aliens because their solar system has 3 suns. This will be important and on the test. Also, I believe they call Trisolarians the Santi in the Netflix series because that's what they called it in the original Chinese copy of the book, but I have not watched it yet, so I will be calling these aliens the Trisolarians, just for your FYI. Fast forward several decades, and governments around the world start to become concerned because top scientists begin to exit the Earth's server by self-inflicted means. And in China, they decide to enlist the help of Wang Miao, who is a big science boy of the nanotech flavor. He is picked up by a local chain-smoking smartass, Shi Chong, or as he's better known by his friends as Da Shi, or Big Shi! Big Shi is the best character in the trilogy, and you can fight me about it in the comments. Also, that's not that big of an achievement because most of the characters kind of suck, but during these super secret meetings, they try to enlist Wong's help by telling him absolutely nothing about all they know about the dead scientist, and Wong just says, nah, I'm good. But Big Shi keeps following him around and pestering about it, and he eventually gets curious and decides, you know what? It is kind of weird. So he kind of starts investigating on his own. But he talks to a few people he knows that are part of this super secret science club where people keep logging off the live server, and his friends there are equally as unhelpful. And he notices one of them playing a super sick VR game called 3 Body. Name drop. Nice. He then decides to channel his inner gamer and buys a VR headset to check out this game because he thought it was weird that his big science friends were spending all their free time being gamers rather than doing some sick science stuff. He makes a super cool screen name and then logs into 3 Body, and he is impressed because 3 Body has RTX turned all the way on full blast. But it's not really a game. It's just a walking simulator with some ancient Chinese guy wandering in a desert talking about the sun. And he notices that the sun is kind of weird in the game because it doesn't behave normally like our sun. This is foreshadowing. Also, one of the guys in the game just shrivels up like a deflated balloon, and the ancient Chinese guy just puts him in his backpack. Weird. Wong ruminates on it and talks to his big science friends more, and he is told to go talk to Ye Wenji because her daughter also decided to exit the Earth's server. Wong learns more about what's going on while being called a nerd by Big Shi, and then one of his big science friends tells him that he should stop doing cool nanotechnology science stuff because someone doesn't want him to do it anymore. And he asks why, and they're like, I don't know. But you should look at universe background radiation at certain time for plot reasons. Weird. So he decides to take a break and channels his inner photographer for relaxation, and all his pictures keep displaying this weird countdown in them. Wong is pretty freaked out by this and does what most gamers do when they get stressed in any capacity whatsoever. Play some video games. Wong logs on to 3 Body, and it's a bit different this time. He's still not sure what's going on, but there's this other ancient dude trying to figure out the pattern of the sun, and he's also wrong because apparently the sun is a stubborn son of a gun. Wang keeps talking to people and nothing is really coming together, but Ye Wenji tells him about a guy that can help him look at the big microwave in space. So he goes to this guy and he's like, hey, can you show me the big microwave in space? Yeah, I can show you the big microwave in space, but that's weird and boring because it never moves. But do you want to look at it? And Wong doesn't really know. He just says that he needs to look at it at this certain time. So they both hang out and talk about science stuff. And when time comes, they're both staring at the big microwave wiggly line on the computer, and the wiggly line moves slightly. Both guys freak out, and Wong decides to stop messing around with nanotechnology for a while. Wong then logs into Three Body again, and I can't remember how many times this actually happens because I'm kind of going off a rough memory here, but he figures out what's happening. The world in Three Body has 3 suns. Wow. Did you know that this is connected to a very well-known real-world physics problem they call the three-body problem? I don't really have time to talk about it. Just know that it's freaky in this context because it is unsolvable and it leads into chaos theory. Anyways, after he makes this declaration about the game having 3 suns, the game's like, you win, and your prize is an invitation to the private party at TwitchCon. So he goes to this... So he goes to this super secret nerd meetup and smooth talks his way into another super duper secret party. At this super secret party, a bunch of big science nerds show up, including Ye Wenji. Gasp! They then have a big argument about which group of nerds in this super secret nerd group is the best, because some of the nerds want to solve the unsolvable 3-body problem equation because the Tri-Solarians are having a hard time building a civilization on their world because their 3 suns keep genociding them. But the other nerds want to make a super secret alien church. Anyways, one of the big nerds, I cannot remember their name, gets killed by a ninja. This is not part of the joke. Then Big Shub busts in with the police to shut down their super secret alien church because religion is against the law in China. Then, again, and not joking, one of these nerds holds up a nuclear bomb. And then he threatens to blow them all up. I'm very serious. Dashi says, no, you. And then disarms the bomb by shooting at it, and it goes boom, just not big boom. Okay, so after all the army bros finally get their confirmation about the aliens and learns about the boat phone the rich guy built that is soon about to pass through the Panama Canal and has lots of juicy intel, the Americans decide that there is fortunately enough oil on the tanker to declare that it could use some freedom. The problem is that that juicy intel on that ship could go bye-bye really fast if they just attacked the ship, and no one can really figure out how to sneak attack it without risking it. Then Big Shu says, hey, this nerd Wong makes nanomaterial. Can't you just use that for something? And the big Arbine guy says, great idea, and they turn Wong's super cool nanomaterial into a boat-sized apple slicer and slice and dice the boat phone, killing everyone on board, including women and children. It's a big success, and they recover lots of sweet data from the boat phone. Turns out the Tri-Solarian nerds have already launched a bunch of spaceships towards Earth, and they should get there in about 400 years, making this the slowest alien invasion book ever written. They also learned that some Tri-Solarian technology is already on Earth called sophons, which are computers made out of a single proton, which is a subatomic particle. You big brains out there may ask, well, that's impossible. How would they even do that, and why? The why is because big spaceships equal big mass, which equals 400 years to get to Earth. Proton equals itty bitty mass, which means let's make big space gun and shoot it at the Earth and it gets there in like a week. John Moses Browning, eat your heart out. How did they make the sophons, you may ask? They blood sacrificed a trillion souls of a microcosmos. Few times. I will not explain this any further. So, the big brains amongst you may have noticed that a proton doesn't have much mass and really can't do a whole lot. What's the point of these sophon computers? Well, one thing it can do is establish quantum link communications so they can spy on humanity. But the most important thing it can do is halt scientific progress on Earth completely. So why and how would they do that? So the why is because Tri-Solarians are scared that 400 years is long enough time for a boom in scientific research that could make Earth's technology become better than the Tri-Solarian invasion fleets by the time they get here. 400 years is a long time to go without an iPhone upgrade. The how is even more wild. So let me ruin some YouTube retention real quick. Okay, subatomic particle, right? Basically no mass. It can't do any damage, right? Think of like a BB versus like a 155 millimeter artillery shell. The artillery shell is gonna mess stuff up, while the BB is just gonna bounce off everything. So subatomic particles are only really gonna be able to mess with other subatomic particles. And what some subatomic particles can it mess with to halt physics on Earth totally? particle accelerators like the Large Hadron Collider. Every time they try to make a test, the Sophons interfere, giving them inconsistent test results. And this is why all the scientists started to off themselves. Because I guess they all thought physics was a lie or something? It seems a bit drastic to me, but the plot's gonna plot, am I right? Okay, so that was book 1. I really liked it. It sets itself up as a mystery, and it builds this bombastic ending, and it has some moments that are just wild. Also, the unnerving elements aren't as amped up in the series yet, except for that one chapter of the Trisolarans building the Sophons. That chapter has some genuinely creepy moments. But all in all, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, there's some problems, but overall I liked it. Also, this is supposed to be a shorter video, and I just realized I'm only done with book 1, so y'all gotta listen faster. Okay, alright, on to book 2. The Dark Forest. The Dark Forest begins like a Nat Geo documentary describing an ant crawling over the gravestone of Yang Dong, the daughter of history's biggest war criminal, Ye Wenji. The ant is a metaphor from something that happens from book 1 that I forgot to mention. Anyways, Ye Wenji is there with new character Luo Ji, the most important character in this entire trilogy. And soon to be big science man / playboy who struggles romantically because his imaginary girlfriend is better than real women. If AI was a thing around the time this book was written, I think we could have a very different storyline. They chat and Ye Wenji tells Luo Ji that he should study cosmic sociology. I'm sorry, what? Huh? Fast forward 3 years. 3 years into the Crisis Era, the era where the Earth is preparing itself for the impending invasion by the Trisolarans. This era is defined by rapid changes in geopolitics and the international economy as they create new programs and think of new think tank groups such as the PDC, which isn't a redundant acronym for masculine parts, but rather for Planetary Defense Council. We are then introduced to a few new characters, Wu Ye and Zhang Beihai. Stay tuned to see Zhang's character go from boring to S tier in like one chapter. So Wu and Zhang are in the Chinese Navy, and they are being drafted into the Space Force so they can help prepare tactics for space battles and help identify crucial technologies as they develop their space boats. Their biggest problem that they seem to face is what the series calls defeatism. Basically, everyone seems to be channeling their inner Charlie Brown because they don't think they can win against the aliens. Honestly, all they would have to do to defeat defeatism is to study the US Marine Corps after they told them that there are space babes out in the galaxy that are waiting for them as soon as they can smoke these alien nerds coming for Earth. Wu Ye suffers a lot from defeatism, but Zhang Beihai does not. Almost annoyingly so, and even calls out Wu Ye in front of a bunch of other Chinese Space Force officers, and that this is so bad, Wu Ye quits his job. I'm pretty sure I'm telling everything out of order here, but we have gotta move. Back to Luo Ji. He's just finished telling a girl, "It's not you, it's me," and she says, "Yeah, it's definitely you." And as they are walking to the street outside, a car crashes right into his now ex-girlfriend, narrowly missing Luo Ji. And guess who shows up to the accident? Big Sha! And Big Sha, being the lovable jerk he is, keeps giving Luo Ji a bunch of grief about the accident, insinuating that it is somehow his fault. And Luo Ji is super confused, especially when he gets tossed on a plane heading away from China with a fighter jet escort. That's pretty weird, huh? Well, he's told that for some reason he's pretty important, and Luo Ji has no idea why, because there isn't really anything too spectacular about him. Yeah, he's pretty smart, but not like leading edge of his field smart. Then they land in New York, and he is whisked away to the UN building for a super secret international meeting. At the meeting, the UN announces what they call the Wall Facer Project. The Wall Facer Project is the UN's resolution to combat the Trisolarans while they prepare for this imminent invasion. So the problem they are trying to overcome with the Wall Facer Project is that the Earth is under constant supervision from the Sophons, so now anything the Earth tries to do, the Trisolarans are going to know about it. So it kind of makes it hard to make a game plan to fight them. The Wallfacer project, however, is special because it gives ridiculous amounts of power and resources to 4 separate individuals to make separate plans to be able to fight or prepare for this doomsday battle by being intentionally misleading about what they are planning and why. The idea is that they can direct these agencies or expend resources, but ultimately they keep all the plans in their head. So all the Trisolarians can do is extrapolate on the possibilities without knowing the full scope of what it could possibly be. So the Wallfacer's job is essentially to play 4D intergalactic chess. There's no way this could possibly go bad, right? The Wallfacers are Frederick Tyler, former military head honcho from the US, Manuel Ray Diaz, former Venezuelan president and big nuclear science man, Bill Hines, a British brain science man, and then finally, Luo Ji, a Chinese nobody. First 3 candidates accept their roles, but Luo Ji is like, nah, I'm good. Then he walks outside and gets shot. Fortunately for Luo Ji, he survives, and it turns out that the assassin is from the ETO, the guys from Book 1 who wanted to make the genocide alien church and who also got the boat phone chopped up. Turns out they're still around, and they're all over the world, and they still hang out in the 3-body VR game, and it's here that they decide they are the Trisolarians' best bet at defeating the Wallfacers. Because not only do the Trisolarians have the problem of not being able to read the Wallfacers' minds, but Trisolarians communicate differently than humans. Trisolarians don't talk. Their face just glows different colors, and that communicates their intentions, making them literal glowies versus glowies to slur. And because of this, the Trisolarians never developed the capacity to lie or be deceitful. But these ETO nerds, because they are humans themselves, can weed out the intentions of the Wallfacers and expose their plans to the Trisolarians and the world. The ETO assign a person to each Wallfacer and dub them Wall Breakers. Wow. Alright, let's get back to Luo Ji. So Luo Ji can't figure out why they want him to be a Wallfacer, and he just doesn't feel like saving the world because he's lazy. But the UN won't leave him alone, and they keep smiling at him weird and winking and saying, yeah, sure, I get it. Yeah, of course this whole plan is dumb. Wink, wink. And then Luo Ji gets an idea straight from r/antiwork, and he tells him, hey, I need a beautiful house next to a lake in the mountains that has all the modern amenities that I could ever want. Don't worry, it's part of the plan. Wink, wink. And the requisition guy is like, sure, a heck of a lot cheaper than the 1,000 hydrogen bombs and space fighters the other guys want. Why not? So they set him up with exactly that. And Luo Ji does exactly nothing. Like zilch. Nada. But he's not really spending that much money compared to the other guys, so the UN just lets him do his thing. Eventually, however, he gets so drunk and sick that he gets depressed, and he starts to wish that he had Riz so that women would come and stay at his hidden chateau. Unfortunately, though, his imaginary girlfriend is still so good, he can't even bring himself to try. But Big Sha, well, Sha has something even better than Riz. He has the full might of the surveillance state of China. And he uses this to find Luo Ji's imaginary girlfriend. I know this sounds hyperbolic, and it is a little bit, but also not really. Anyways, Big Sha brings Luo Ji his real-life imaginary girlfriend, and they fall in love and have a baby. Aw, incel dreams do come true. Listen, all you have to do is wait for an international crisis and for the UN to issue your standard issue wives that match your exact height to weight ratio that share your own special interest in the nuances of anime. Look, the chances aren't 100%. They aren't 0 either. Okay, back to Zhang Beihai. Pretty sure I'm out of order again, but who cares? Anyways, Zhang has been really good at his job. He's respected and admired by everyone because he's just so darn positive they're gonna beat the snot out of those aliens. Those nerds. However, his influence can only go so far, and he really wants them to study propulsion methods that are different than chemical rockets. The problem is that the guys that make chemical rockets are really good at it and make a lot of money, and they don't want to mess up a good thing. Stocks are stocks after all. But this will probably cause the other propulsion method research to not advance fast enough, and Zhang really wants some fast space boats for the future because he knows chemical rockets just ain't gonna be fast enough. I am so tempted to rant about propulsion stuff that's going on right now in the real world, but we don't have time. You're not listening fast enough. Come on! So Zhang follows some rocket CEOs up the space elevator. Oh, and yeah, by the way, they built a space elevator with that nanotechnology stuff, and he watches them tour the facilities in space until they come to take a group selfie. Zhang uses this moment to take out a pistol loaded with a special ammunition where the bullets are made of meteorite fragments. He then fires off several magazines worth of these bullets at these rocket company CEOs, killing several, making it appear as if they were caught in a meteor shower. This is where Zhang's character goes from meh to really cool really fast. Zhang felt so convicted that they needed this new technology that he was just willing to get his hands dirty with some wet work. Anyways, he gets away with murder and decides it's time to take a nap in cryogenic pod for a few hundred years. Oh yeah, humanity mastered cryogenics. Whoops, forgot about that one. So let's see what the wall facers are up to. Let's start with good old red-blooded American Frederick Tyler. So his plan is to develop what the book calls the mosquito swarm. It will make sense in a moment why they call it that, but that name is so dumb. I hate it. The mosquito swarm drone plan thing is to design a swarm of small nuclear-armed space fighters with drone integration that would allow them to be commanded by Tyler, but would also be piloted by individual kamikaze pilots. The reasoning he gives is that large spaceships are not going to be that helpful, and that their best bet is to reenact Pearl Harbor, but in space. What's really funny, however, is that he travels the world looking for these kamikaze pilots, and wouldn't you know it, people just don't want to die in kamikaze strikes anymore. He even goes to Japan and asks, why don't your people want to do kamikaze stuff anymore? And the Japanese ambassador just responds, what do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people?
Anyways, let's look at Ray Diaz, the second wall facer. So Diaz makes them make the biggest bomb the world can possibly make. Bombs that make the Tsar Bomba look like a firecracker. Then he says, all right, make thousands of them. Then he says, all right, now use one to blow up a hole in Mercury. So they do that. Now there's a big hole in Mercury. All the while, everyone in the PDC is super nervous because they think Diaz might be a little crazy and be obsessed with H-bombs now that he has unlimited power and resources. And, you know, he never had that before in Venezuela, but he hasn't done anything to break the rules yet. All right, so what about Hines, the British wall facer? Hines starts his journey out by wanting to enhance humans' cognitive abilities. Basically, he wants to make humans big brain. So he pours his efforts into bioscans and mappings of the brain. But he's kind of limited in what he can do, so he just kind of kickstarts his project, and then he goes down for an ice nap until they can make a breakthrough. So somewhere along this timeline, Tyler, our American wall facer, gets pretty bummed because he can't find people who want to die in his kamikaze mosquito fighter. So he decides to go visit Luoji at his freeloader mansion. They have a little chat, and Tyler can tell that Luoji isn't doing a darn thing. And he laughs and tells him he's pretty smart for just going with the flow. Luoji then goes inside for a bit, and out of nowhere, someone appears from the field outside the house. They approach Tyler and tell them that he is his wall breaker. No, I'm not doing it justice because this is, an inaccurate summary of the story. But these moments when the wall breakers come out is genuinely really cool. Anyways, Tyler is depressed, so he doesn't really care too much. But his wall breaker goes on to tell him that they figured out his plan. The mosquito swarm's plan to fight the Trisolarians was a ruse. Their intended purpose was to betray the Space Force and immobilize all the space boats right before the Trisolarians entered the solar system. Then the swarm would begin to collect ice on the different moons in the solar system and take them to the Trisolarians as they enter the solar system as a tribute. But again, another ruse. Once they got close, they would self-detonate, destroying the Trisolarian fleet. So, This would be an unprecedented triple cross. Tyler, after hearing this, walks out into the field and directs a high-velocity chunk of lead into his face, therefore exiting the server. Let's take a look at Ray Diaz's plan. So Diaz spends a lot of his spare time in a super-secret bunker underground, but somehow his own wall breaker finds a way inside and spills the beans on his super-secret wall-facer plan. Diaz's plan is even more devastating and devious than even Tyler's triple-cross drone swarm. Diaz intended to use the massive bomb stockpile as a threat to the Trisolarans as a way to essentially deny them any sort of victory, while simultaneously also dooming humanity. His plan was to slow down Mercury's orbit by detonating all the H-bombs in the crater he created so that the entire planet would fall out of orbit into the sun, destabilizing the sun and then destroying the entire solar system. Basically a form of mutual destruction if the Trisolarans didn't back down. Diaz then decides to yell fake news and beats the crap out of his wall breaker. However, upon hearing about the appearance of Diaz's wall breaker and their statements regarding his plan, the PDC decides to summon Diaz to a hearing in order to strip Diaz of his title as wall facer, because destroying the solar system is totally not cool and definitely very illegal. At the hearing, however, Diaz tells them that he has a dead man switch to an H-bomb in New York City that he will totally detonate if they don't let him go home. So naturally, they let him go home to Venezuela, and when he gets there, the Venezuelans just decide to beat him to death. Also, he was lying about the dead man switch. And now we are down to 2 wall facers. So let's get back to Luoji. Luoji and his wife and child are living life to the fullest, but this entire time Luoji told his wife that the plan was just for her to be happy, and eventually she decides that's not really a good plan for saving the world. Later she decides to take her and her child into cryosleep without saying anything, and when Luoji finds out what happens, he is told by the PDC chairperson that they will only be awakened after the Doomsday battle, so Luoji had finally better get to work. And you know what? This is the first time he's ever actually had a reason to actually get to work, because he hasn't really cared about anything or anyone up until this point, but now he has to if he wants to save his family. So he gets to work and he devises a plan. He finds a star approximately 15 light years away from Earth, and using Ye Wenji's technique of boosting radio signals using the sun as an amplifier, he broadcasts the location of this particular star system out into the galaxy. When he asked what he was doing, he only responds that he cast a spell upon the star. At this point in the book, I was just took. Like, what do you mean he cast a spell? At this point, Luoji says there's nothing he can do and says to wake him up if something is to happen to his star, and then he decides to go into cryo sleep. It'll be a long time before most of our cast in the Dark Forest will wake up. Several hundred years, in fact. But we will have a slight intermission where our other wall facer, Hines, wakes up to continue his work. After several years in hibernation, Hines wakes up to a breakthrough in the mapping of human cognition. And because research and technology is still kind of stunted by the Sophons and all of that, the people he left in charge just kind of brute forced their way into a discovery. And it's kind of hard to explain what they did, but it's like carving Mount Rushmore with a spoon. Anyways, they're making a lot of progress now, but they have hit an odd roadblock. During their test on live human subjects, they have inadvertently made someone hydrophobic. And I mean hydrophobic, not thalassophobic. Thalassophobia is like the fear of like large bodies of water, like the sea, oceans, rivers, lakes, that kind of stuff. Hydrophobia, however, is the fear of water. When you become hydrophobic, you literally cannot drink water. This is also real, in case you didn't know it. It happens when you get rabies. Not going to show you anything. There are lots of people with rabies trying to drink water that literally can't. Kind of sad, though, because there's not a cure for rabies. So, none of these people make it very long after that. Anyways, depressing real stuff aside, they realize that this is pretty odd, and Hines decides to try it on himself. And wouldn't you know it, he also becomes hydrophobic. Like, Hines, my man, you're a pretty important person here. I get the responsible, fearless leader and all, but that's the equivalent of testing safety ratings of the new Toyota Corolla by being the crash dummy yourself. It's just not wise. Anyways, this does lead to a discovery. They realize that they can implant unbreakable beliefs in any individual. Now, how is this useful to our current situation? That's right, defeatism. Kiss your brain. That's been a theme of the second book for a while because people are just depressed about the outlook of the future of humanity. Oh, also, I forgot to mention this other little thing. Whoops. So, in the beginning of the Dark Forest, when they are talking about all their options before they settled on the whole stand and fight solution, one of the solutions was to send humans out of the solar system. The book calls this idea, can you guess? Escapism. That's right. There's a lot of isms in this book. Anyways, everyone decided that escapism was unequal. Why do you, Jeremy Smith, get to leave the solar system on a cool space boat while I have to fight aliens on Earth? That's totally not fair and totally uncool. I really hope there's a Jeremy Smith that watches this video. If you are, say hi in the comments for me, will you? Anyways, the UN in their infinite wisdom decided to say that escapism is racist and therefore against the law. And that kind of leads into the defeatism even more, because a lot of people thought it was a great idea, but now they can only have those stand and fight options, so it's even more hopeless. I mean, God forbid we have too many baskets for our eggs. I forgot how the saying goes, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, how does this new method of implanting unbreakable beliefs work? Hein's idea is that he can implant the belief that humanity will win in people's minds, therefore making them better somehow. I don't really see how that actually helps, but let's just roll with it. Anyways, Heinz tells the UN about this and they freak out, saying it's akin to mind control and should absolutely be outlawed. However, he bargains a position where the treatment would be on a volunteer basis and only be offered to Space Force members. So, the UN says, fine. I guess a little Axe body wash for the brain can't be that bad, and they allow it. But wouldn't you know it, a lot of people don't want to get brainwashed, and the only people that come want to get brainwashed with stuff like, yeah, my ex-wife totally loved me, and really sad stuff like that. Anyways, after a while, some people come and receive the treatment, but not a whole lot, and Heinz goes back into cryo sleep with his wife. Fast forward 200 years into the future, and Luo Heinz and Heinz's wife are awakened from cryo sleep. I cannot remember Heinz's wife right now. Society looks different now, a lot different. People's clothes project moving images and scenery across the surface. There are flying cars. Most of society exists underground with a projected sky. Literally everything can be turned into a tablet, including trash. And everyone, for the most part, seems pretty stoked about the future of mankind. Seems kind of weird because before the time skip, things were looking pretty bleak. Everyone was suffering from defeatism, remember, and all that stuff, you know, except for Zhang Beihai, that guy. Well, turns out things did get worse. Way worse. This thing called the Great Ravine happened, which is kind of like the Great Depression if it took steroids. So everyone kind of gave up on environmentalism because, you know, aliens are coming and all that. So they're just like, whatever, guys, we got to build spaceships and laser guns, other cool stuff. We don't have time for all this hippie nonsense. Get out of my face, Greta. Well, this caused a lot of the surface of the Earth to just turn into dust and caused famine. And this famine was so bad, it took Earth's population from a little over 8 billion down to just 3.3 billion. So yeah, that's kind of bad. The thing that turned everything around was that society as a whole just decided that they need to make human lives better. And that whole invasion thing, well, that could just wait a little bit while we fixed everything up so that living was tolerable again. So they invented Beyond Meat 3.0, Synthesis Edition, fixed world hunger, made all the furniture out of whatever Tempur-Pedic is making 200 years from now, and put tablet screens on everything. Truly a Redditor's dream. Oh yeah, and guess who else took a big cryo nap? He's back, and he's still taking care of Liu Ji because apparently everything in the new world is trying to kill him. Like a flying car falls out of the sky, a manhole cover opens up underneath him, and an android tries to murder him in a restaurant. All the kind of stuff that makes me terrified of our impending technological future. So Big Shu takes him to his house in this underground metropolis and turns it into a safe house by turning all the smart home features off. So obviously, it's got to be the ETO, right? Maybe Luigi's wall breaker is still out there somehow, and instead of doing the cool villain monologue thing, he just wants to murderize him instead. Well, a police officer comes over and tells him that this is impossible because they are all dead. they took him out years ago. But in one of their final plans, they released a killer virus into the worldwide network that uses all the connected infrastructure to kill people. Imagine getting murked by your smart fridge. Also, can I just have analog stuff now? I'm so tired of like everything wanting to connect to my Wi-Fi. I just need my refrigerator to keep my stuff cold. I don't need it to play the audiobook for 1984 while I chop onions and rant about the deep space to my wife, who absolutely does not care. Anyways, the powers that be kind of patched out the killer virus by removing the targets from the code, but they didn't remove the code itself. So when Luoji came out of cryosleep, it was just reactivated and tried to take him out. So the kindly policeman, servant of the surveillance state of China 9000, removes him from the virus, thus making it safe for Luoji to travel around. So this whole story, the ETO has tried really hard to kill Luoji. More so than any of the other characters, like the other wall facers. The wall facers, they decided, were a threat to the plans, but they decided to just play Machiavellian 4D chess with those guys. What makes Luoji different? I know. I'm not telling you yet. So Luoji, this whole time, is really curious about what's going on with his spell. He, the one he placed on the star 200 years ago, because he was supposed to be woken up if something ever happened. But pretty much no one in the general public now knows what a wall facer even is. So turns out humanity just kind of forgot all about the wall facers, because global famine is kind of more important when it wipes out more than half the population. They also don't care because humanity at this point has just leapfrogged the tech tree in Civ 5 as much as they could to develop giant rail guns, laser cannons, and space boats that can travel at 15% the speed of light. That's 5% more than the Trisolarian space boats, which means humanity is going to wipe the floor with them, right? Humanity also has over like 2,000 of these ships at this point, so everyone just kind of thinks the Trisolarians will want to negotiate some kind of peace, because 200 years ago, the Trisolarians sent out a single probe ahead of the main fleet, right after Luoji went into hibernation, and everyone is thinking it's some type of peace envoy. Because how could a single probe stand up to humanity's 2,000 plus warships? Well, Luoji and Hines are eventually summoned by the UN to discuss the Wallfacer program. The UN pretty much universally agrees that the Wallfacer program was a big, dummy, low IQ plan made by stupid old people, and they aren't going to do it anymore because they've got their big, cool space boats. When Luoji asks about his spell, they basically tell him he's dumb and that he's fired along with Hines, and kick him from the Zoom meeting right as Hines' wife starts making a fuss. I gotta find her name real quick before someone calls me sexist or something for not naming her. Keiko Yamasuki. There. Okay, moving on. So normally, something like this would devastate a normal character in a book. But remember, this is professional sloth maxer Luoji. He's ecstatic, and turns out his investments from 200 years ago are paying huge dividends, and so he's just got to get his family out of cryo and chill. So Luoji and Big Shu decide to get out of the underground city and return to the surface world with a lot of the other cryo people that just kind of hate this hyper-technological underground cities, and they just chill there for a while. But something else happened at that same UN meeting. Alright, so Hines and his wife Keiko were at the UN meeting in person, and as soon as they disconnected Luoji, Keiko stands up across from Hines and declares, "I am your wall breaker." And as with all the other wall breakers, Keiko breaks down Hines' plan. The brainwashing, which the book calls a mental seal, that was supposed to make people believe 100% in victory, didn't actually do that. Hines in secret tweaked the process to where it would actually do the opposite, making a person a total defeatist. And he even administered this mental seal to himself, as well as making alternative devices that could impose this mental seal secretly while he was in hibernation. Okay, so what's the point in making people embrace defeatism? Well, Hines, like the other wall facers, didn't figure out a way to win, not a way to survive. The idea was to imprint enough people with this mental seal so that it would create this secret society of people who would plan to escape rather than fight. And after relaying all of this to the UN and to her husband Heinz, Keiko commits seppuku. 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 I said this wrong one time before, and somebody flamed me for it, and I cannot remember. You know what I'm talking about. Words. Here they are. That word. Look it up. As you do. Go off, Queen. The UN then begins to freak the heck out because remember, escapism, both illegal and racist. And those space boats are super expensive and they don't want anyone running off with any of them. Heinz at this point doesn't even know if it worked or not because remember, he's been in cryosleep for over 200 years. So the UN decides to pull its ace in the fight against defeatism, Zhang Beihai. So Zhang Beihai comes out of cryo along with others from his era with the task of rooting out the secret defeatist who might have found their way into being a captain of one of the Space Force's shiny new ships. And Beihai is pretty impressed with how everything turned out. It seems like his gamble in assassinating those rocket CEOs produced ships that were indeed wicked fast. He is sent to the ship the Natural Selection and basically given interim captain responsibilities during his investigation. And he spends most of his time just trying to figure out how the ship kind of operates, and wouldn't you know, they actually simplified how the whole process works. I mean, everything is way more advanced, but as an acting captain, all they have to do is pull up a screen and press a button, and that takes care of that. But before we get any further with what Beihai is up to, let's look at the Trilogy probe coming towards Earth. Alright, so humanity has a bunch of space boats at this point, and they've been preparing for this invasion for 200 plus years, analyzing all forms of possible warfare in space. And this is a single probe from Trilogy. What on Earth could it possibly do against 2,000 plus warships? People, of course, are speculating what it can possibly be because it looks kind of like a piece of art, and people just generally think it might be some sort of peace offering. So the Space Force is having a tough time trying to figure out who they're going to send to intercept it because apparently 100 years of peace amongst themselves has gotten them itching for some glory, but physicist Ding Yi goes to the Space Force and tells them that if he doesn't get the look at it first, he will literally kill themselves. Not hyperbole. Also, because I am bad at this, Ding Yi is in the first book and actually dated Yang Dong, you know, the daughter of Ye Wenji, the lady who sent the first message to the Trisolarians. I think I lumped him into the group I labeled big brain science nerds or something like that. Yeah. Anyways, at this point, he's gone in and out of cryosleep several times, and he's pretty old at this point. But unlike most humans of his era, he's still pretty skeptical about humanity's survival. Either way, the Space Force says that's fine, but we're going to send your hospice nurse with you when you go to check it out. The Space Force also makes the decision to take every ship in the Space Force to intercept this one probe. All 2,000 plus ships. At this point in the story, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen, but I know one thing for certain. This was a bad idea. But let's check back with Zhang Beihai. Alrighty, so Zhang Beihai has just been going up and down this ship, checking out how everything works, and he is impressed. It's almost as if he doesn't care about if the captain is a secret defeatist or not. Now, before we move on, let's talk just a little bit about how these new space boats work. So, these new spaceships are outfitted with everything a human could need in space. Since humanity essentially figured out how to synthesize food, these ships can kind of provide food continuously to its crew without needing to restock food stores as much. Also, when I say synthesize, it's not like something comes from nothing. It's more like they can grow and harvest things in hours versus months. So these ships can service as a generational ship of sorts, which just means generations of people can essentially survive on a ship indefinitely, for the most part. They're also fitted with cryogenics, so people can take big naps when they need to, and they have an interesting method in solving the squishy human aspect when the ships enter a high-speed state. Remember, these ships can reach speeds of 15% of the speed of light. That's 44,968,869 meters per second. Or, if you prefer the freedom unit, that's 27,942 miles per second. That's pretty dang fast. The fastest thing currently that's ever been flown by a person is the X-15, which reached Mach 6.7, or a speed of 2,021 meters per second, or 4,520 miles per hour. So these ships don't just start out at that speed. They still have to build up to it. But considering the power of the engines, if they do enter a high-speed state, then that's just going to turn any humans inside into tomato paste. So how do we get around that? Through a method they call the deep sea state. A deep sea state involves the ship filling the human-occupied areas of the ship with an incompressible liquid that people just breathe into their lungs, and that still allows them to take oxygen from the liquid. Yeah, pretty neat, huh? The idea comes from like the biology of like deep sea creatures and how they're able to withstand enormous amounts of pressure at the bottom of the ocean. So now humans use it to go fast in space without turning themselves into jelly. This isn't totally necessary for this inaccurate summary video we've got going on here, but there's a very specific part of this book I want to talk about, and it's my YouTube channel. So yeah. This space boat, the Natural Selection, is currently docked, and Beihai he's discovered that this ship can kind of be hacked. What I mean by this is that the ship can go into a remote control sort of mode where the captain has essentially complete access to steer the ship into a direction and engage the high-speed engines without any sort of like authorizations or safety blocks to stop him. So Beihai takes the ship out of dock. He selects a star, somewhat close to Earth, but still several light years away. He then locks himself in a room, engages the countdown to sublight travel, and then tells the crew they better get into a deep sea state unless they want to be turned into human paste. Seems like an odd way to perform an investigation to find the secret defeatist, right? Well, that's because it's not. Beihai is the defeatist. Whoa, another plot twist. Wow. So it turns out Beihai from the start would use his big tactical military brain to figure out a way for humanity to survive. And it wasn't to stand and fight, no, but to launch themselves into the stars. This is why he took out those rocket CEOs, because he knew that anything slower wouldn't allow humanity to reach any new stars. The guise of optimism he showed his superiors was just to garner trust so that he might have the opportunities such as this. Because remember, what he's doing right now is considered escapism. And that's a crime against humanity, according to the UN. But Beihai just told those blue helmets where they can put their laws. So Beihai escapes. But remember, the ship was in dock. He had to leave without filling up the gas tank. And so the Space Force decides to send 4 ships after Beihai to bring him back for justice. Also, I just want to bring this up now. That whole thing with Hein's secret wall facer plan and the mental defeatist seal doesn't really go anywhere else. Beihai was just a defeatist on his own, and I'm pretty sure that they never met in the books, like Heinz and Beihai. So yeah, fun plot thread. Let me check something here. Oh, no! The light. Hey, sorry for the whole surface of the sun on my face kind of thing. Not that the lighting is particularly good, because I do look like a ghost, but I did want to share a little secret with you on how I fixed that. You see, I didn't actually do anything, but wait. You see, right now, in this video is tomorrow for me. This video is taking 2 whole days, but I respect you and wanted to preserve the continuity and the immersion of this video, so I actually put the same shirt back on because I care about you. But obviously, you are not listening fast enough. This video took so long to do that I actually had to go to work in the middle of it, and I might actually have to do that a 3rd time. So, because you are not listening fast enough, the very least you could do is put a like on this video or subscribe if you want to see other silly videos like this from funny internet man on the other side of your screen, whether that is a TV or a phone, as you do your chores, eat your food, consume your beer, whatever it may be. Or you could go to the comments and tell me that you dislike all these silly words I'm telling about your new favorite sci-fi trilogy from China. Well, speaking of, I guess we should just kind of get back into it. I'm watching you. So not long afterwards, the Trisolar probe comes into the solar system. So the Space Force and Dinghy go to intercept it and pull it into a ship. The probe has the appearance of a teardrop and has a mirror smooth surface and no obvious points of propulsion. Many of those present observe its beauty and are in awe, except for Ding Yi, who wants a closer look at how it is made. So Yi has the technicians whip out a microscope to inspect the surface. Upon initial inspection, there is no change. The surface is completely smooth, which has them baffled. If you magnify something enough, you will eventually see that even a smooth surface like a mirror aren't completely smooth. It's only our macroscopic perception of the comparison to other surfaces. So, everyone is fairly impressed, and Yi tells them to enhance. The same result. Enhance, still mirror smooth. Enhance, 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 enhance until they reach the limits of their equipment to enhance any further, and the surface of the droplet is still as smooth as it is to their bare eyes. The technicians are still in awe, and Ding Yi becomes more worried than ever because he realizes that the technology to construct such a strong device is well beyond human capabilities. It is at this moment he screams for all the technicians and the people on board the ship to run for their lives. But in that same instance, the engines on board the droplet come to life, vaporizing everybody in the ship instantly. On a serious note, this is one of my most favorite moments in this book. That tension of them bringing the droplet onto the ship, with Denyi's skepticism kind of mirrored by the, or not mirrored, but parallel to the, everyone's like, oh, it's so pretty. That in conjunction with the inspection of the surface, I don't know what it was. It just got me hooked. But things are about to accelerate hard now, literally. So now, this droplet with its mirror smooth surface is speeding towards all of the space boats, and all the AI on the warships have no idea what's going on. But within moments, a warship just explodes. Then another, and another, and another one. In just a few minutes, a whole line of warships is just gone. So the AI is going through every possible solution for what can be happening, and it just thinks that the teardrop self-detonated and blew up the ship, and that it is being attacked by an invisible enemy. But out of all the tactics and the planning and everything they went over for the last 200 years with the Space Force, they weren't able to predict this attack of just vessels ramming other vessels. Because this droplet, with its mirror smooth surface, it's not just pretty and shiny, it's indestructibly hard. So it is just going straight through the hulls of these spaceships like a hot knife through butter. So this just kind of goes on forever, and warships are just blowing up left and right. And it takes them a while to kind of figure out what's going on. And once they finally figure out that it's the droplets just cruising through these warships, they go to fire on it with their rail guns, their lasers, all that, and there is no effect because the surface is just that strong. Also, some of the ships decide that it's time to bail because they can't really do anything, but they can't maneuver fast enough because this thing is just going so fast. And also, the ships take a while to get into that deep sea state, and most of these ships are not. And you remember, going into a high-speed state is just going to turn you into human spaghetti. Which, however, now we come to why I wanted to give you the whole details on the deep sea state and how all that works. I'm just going to go get the book and read you the passage. Dark Forest. Most horrifying of all was what happened to Einstein and Gia, whose captains bypassed system protections via remote control mode and entered ahead for acceleration. None of their personnel were protected by deep sea state. Images transmitted from Zia showed a hangar emptied of fighters but occupied by over 100 people who were flattened against the deck by the high G's once acceleration began. From this vantage point, observers saw crimson flowers of blood bloom on the white space the size of a football field. forming extremely thin layers that spread out and ultimately merged into one immense force. Spherical cabins presented the ultimate horror. At the beginning of the hypergravitation, everyone inside slid to the bottom, and then the devil's weighty hand squished them into a lump, as if bailing up a pile of clay men, with no time for anyone to even scream. The only sound was of shattering bones and viscera squeezing out. Then the pile of flesh and bones was submerged into a bloody liquid that turned eerily clear once the solids were precipitated out by the high Gs. Its surface flat and motionless as a mirror under the intense force. God, I cannot read. It seemed solid, and the formless pile of flesh, bone, and organs lay within it like rubies sealed in crystal. Frickin' brutal. However, there were two ships that were indeed able to get away because they were already in this deep sea state before all of this ever happened. And we'll get to that in a bit. As of right now, however, there is Zhang Beihai and his ship and the 4 ships chasing him, who, after hearing about this battle with the droplet, decide to just join Beihai to find another world. And then these other 2 ships from the Doomsday battle that also get away. So, yeah. Pretty smart. It's like, yes, we stand no chance. Let's just dip. So humanity lost all its thousands of warships in like a little over an hour. So how does humanity handle that? Yeah, not too well, actually. Everything on Earth is in a massive panic as people start to freak out and do all the usual mass panic stuff, including a giant public orgy for some reason. I mean, I guess. Look, it's your book section, Lu. You do what you want, bro. Both Luoji and Buksha are trying to figure out what's going on and see how they can help. Pretty much the only people at this time that can actually do anything useful are the people that come from the cryogenic tanks from earlier generations, because the present generation just becomes useless, which feels like some type of interpretive generational message possibly, but I don't know anything really about like Chinese boomers versus millennials or anything like that. So anyways, Luoji and Big Shi are eventually found by a group of people, and they start just begging them to save them. And Luoji is all like, I'm sorry, come again for Big Fudge? Turns out people finally figured out what happened with Luoji's spell. So if you remember earlier in the video and in this book, Luoji, before he cryoed himself 200 years into the future, set a spell upon a star. Well, he called it a spell to just be cryptic, because that's what the wall facers were meant to do. What he did, however, was just broadcast its coordinates out into the cosmos in every direction, and after a little over 100 years had passed, the star was destroyed, and this confirmed Luoji's theory about the nature of the universe. All right, Buckies and Buccos, time to learn about cosmic sociology and the truth of the Dark Forest theory. Okay, so cosmic sociology has 2 points. Point 1, survival is the primary need of a civilization. Point 2, civilizations continuously grow and expand, but matter in the universe remains constant. Basically, it's just survival of the fittest, and there's only so many resources available. Pretty simple. So what is the Dark Forest theory? Okay, so it goes like this. Humanity is this hunter in a dark forest carrying a slingshot, and we're just kind of walking through and humming to ourselves, enjoying a nice stroll. However, this forest is also full of a bunch of other hunters with itchy trigger fingers carrying M60s ready to become a bullet lumberjack as so much as they hear a bee fart in a particular direction. Why? Well, it's tied into what the Trisolarans feared from the first book. Remember, they went through a ton of trouble building the Sophons so they could, put a stop to humanity's understanding of physics. The fear was that humanity could possibly overcome them with a technological leap in the time it took the Trisolarans to actually get to Earth. The last part just comes down to simple economics, however. So you're this baby hunter in the forest, and you're being loud enough to where some hunters will eventually hear you. Some hunters could possibly try to check it out with a drone just to see what's up. Some might just assume that it's weak and do nothing or not care. But all it takes is for one trigger-happy hunter with a howitzer to return them to the carbon from whence they came, assuming carbon-based life. And that's just because it's the economical option. It's just much more simple. Why take the risk? And this is why the Trisolarans were trying so hard to kill Luoji, because Ye Wenji put this little bug in his ears years ago. The timing kind of sucks, however, because now the whole Space Force is kind of blown up or trying to leave the solar system, and now there's this indestructible teardrop thing from the Trisolarans that keeps breaking all their space boats. And now they're crawling back to Luoji to fix the problem. And it just kind of sucks because, there's not really anything left that Luoji can even do. Segue. I wonder what those other guys on the Space Force boats that left the solar system are doing. Did you guess that they would try to kill each other so that you, the reader, would have another example of cosmic sociology? No? Well, too bad. This isn't a story that makes you feel good at all. So yeah, it turns out that when you take a ship that wasn't really designed to go interstellar and there isn't enough spare parts or food resources, then, somebody is going to have to give up their own share. Also, Zhang Beihai was a pretty neat character, right? Yeah, he gets blown up. So out of the 5 ships that left with Zhang Beihai, there's only one left, named Blue Space. Oh, and the other 2 ships that survived the Doomsday Battle, yeah, same thing happened with them. One of them, blew the other one up and scavenged it for parts and protein. We'll talk about the protein later. Blood for the blood god, am I right? So at this point, pretty much everything is on fire, right? How on earth do we even have a 3rd book? Well, the UN tells Luoji how sorry they are about telling him how dumb his spell was now that it looks like it worked, and they give him back his wall-facer privileges. But yeah, remember, it's kind of too late now, right? We've got this battering ram droplet that's just going to break whatever they try to do if it so much as looks like a space boat. Well, Luoji busies himself with whatever he can. That just so happens to be this early detection system project called the Snow Project. Just to make this super simple so we don't get into the weeds of it, they're taking bombs and they're making these dust clouds in space so that when the Trisolaran space fleet comes into the solar system and they pass through these clouds, they're easier to detect. Seems kind of useless, really, but that's just what he's doing. Anyways, the Trisolaran fleet is still 200 years away, so humanity has time. They just can't really do anything meaningful because of the droplet. Well, years pass on by, and people eventually become fed up with Luoji again. He just can't catch a break because he's working on this project that ultimately won't save humanity. Eventually, Luoji is ostracized from society and he spirals into alcoholism. After a while, it looks like he's given up on humanity and even himself. Then he travels to Yang Dong's grave once more and he begins to dig a shallow grave. He pulls out a firearm, points it at himself, and he speaks out loud words that would change humanity forever. Hey, Trisolaran bros, I know you're watching, so I'm going to need you to get your manager on the phone because if you don't, I'm going to set off a chain of explosions in space. And it's going to dox both your address and mine to space Twitter, and we both know how that turns out. So Luoji uses this mutually assured destruction deadman switch to force the Trisolaran bros to call off the invasion and give up some sweet future tech that allows humanity to finally get that intergalactic cell phone. So that's pretty much the Dark Forest. It seems to me like it's most everyone's favorite book, and I would probably agree with that. There's some fun ideas, and the Wallfacer storylines is kind of cool. The Mosquito Swarm idea, or the name, is still a dumb name, but I'll forgive it. The Imaginary Girlfriend storyline is still pretty whack, but now it is time for the penultimate conclusion to the 3-body problem series with the final entry, Death Sin. And let me just say, okay, there's some really, really cool stuff here. And honestly, as far as cosmic horror or indifference or whatever goes, it's probably the freakiest out of all of them. Yeah, I'm gonna get a little heated in this one. We start our story during the fall of Constantinople. Yeah, we're going back real far with the beginning of this one. The Byzantines are in their final days, and having become desperate, a prostitute comes forward to the Emperor Constantine the 11th to offer her magic granted by God to slay the Ottoman Emperor. Of course, Constantine is suspicious, but his advisors tell them that she does have mysterious ways because she was able to obtain an artifact from a sealed vault that she would have had no way to access. So Constantine tests her by asking her to assassinate a prisoner. She agrees and says that she must not be followed. The next day, she comes back bearing a sack with a brain that looks perfectly preserved, and afterwards they find that the prisoner is indeed dead, but there is no sign of death. Very odd. So Constantine commits her to her task to slay the Ottoman Emperor, but this comes too late. The magic that allowed her to move unseen through the world is now gone, and Constantinople falls. Okay, so this introduction to the book is a banger, alright? Like, how does this fit in with the Trisolaran invasion and the Dark Forest theory and mutually assured destruction and all that? I mean, I know, but isn't that cool to start your story off that way? Okay, so we have another flashback, or, well, I mean, we're flash forwarding from Constantinople falling, but it's not like the 200 years in the future of modern day. So it's like right before we know about the Trisolarans, that time. Anyways, Yang Dong, the daughter of Ye Wenji, you know, the one that sold humanity out to the Trisolarans, well, she discovers her mom has betrayed humanity because her mom left the group chat open on the family computer. Then she does some computer simulation stuff about the effects of life on a planetary ecosystem, but you know what? It doesn't affect the whole plot line, blah, 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 blah. It is, life isn't as fragile as you think, and in fact has a profound effect on the universe, blah, blah, blah. You gotta listen faster, okay? We just gotta roll on. Anyways, enter Yun Tianming,
Another one of the most important characters in this story.
who, like Luo Ji, also suffers from negative riz. This is also just past the events of the first book as well, so humanity knows about the invasion, but it's, you know, before the 200-year time leap. Time is convoluted in the world of Three Body, much like Lordran from Dark Souls. Okay, so Tian Ming is currently dying in the hospital from cancer, and China just made euthanasia legal. And Tian Ming doesn't really have a lot of money, or really anyone who he cares about, so he decides, all right, cool, I'll just do that option. But before that happens, an old classmate comes to visit and gives him a small fortune because Tian Ming gave him the idea years ago to market his own grass flavored of Prime that eventually made him millions. So Tian Ming now has tons of money, but he isn't healthy enough to really leave the hospital, and he doesn't really feel like using it to prolong his life. So he thinks about his life, how much he hates his sister, his old classmates, and about a girl named Chen Jing. Sheng Jing. Another super important character. Also, spoiler, she freaking sucks. Anyways, Tian Ming remembers how nice she was to him and how pretty she was, but he never had the huevos to ask her out. He's not quite as bad as Luo Ji and his imaginary girlfriend, but yeah, he's another maidenless character. Somebody please go help Cixin Liu, he might need a wingman. Tian Ming decides to do the incel dream of doing the most romantic thing they can possibly conceive right before dying. Yeah, that'll make him love you. Alright, so what's the most romantic gift you can possibly give someone? A car? A house? Millions of dollars so that they never have to possibly worry about their finances ever? No, that's way too tacky. No, the most romantic gift would be her own star. Because the UN decided that they can sell stars now, because I guess the bake sale wasn't going to drum up enough money to build those nice space boats after all. So, Tian Ming buys Sheng Zhen Jin. I cannot talk today, and I cannot pronounce Sheng Zhen. It's so hard. Sheng Zhen, Sheng Zhen, Sheng Zhen, Sheng Zhen, Sheng. So Tian Ming buys Qing Jin a star and tells the star salesman to not tell her who gave it to her. And now Tian Ming decides to shuffle off from this mortal plane, tipping his metaphorical fedora. But right before the drugs are administered, Qing Jin bursts into the hospital and tells him that humankind needs him. Oh, the drama. Wow. Let's jump back in time again and see what Qin Zhen was up to. Gosh, I cannot say Qing Zhen. Gosh. I'm going to say Zhen. Zhen. Like Jennifer, but not. All right, so Zhen and Tian Ming went to rocket college, basically. But Zhen was bigger brain and not socially inept and way more successful. So successful that she was chosen for this very prestigious international project called the Staircase Project. The goal of the project was to send a human in a probe to the Trisolaren invasion fleet so that they could spy on the Trisolarans or something. Alright, so this one is one of those plot points that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So, like spying on the Trisolarans, that makes sense. But also, as you will soon see, it is not like humanity had the technology to really send a spy craft of any substance. So, like, why not just send a series of probes with, like, monitoring equipment that will, just beam the data back? I don't know, but for some reason, they gotta send a person. And also, this probe has to reach 1% the speed of light, which, at this point in time in the story is a lot. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the guy in charge of the Staircase Project, Thomas Wade. Now, Wade is some ex-CIA spook, and he's also an absolute a-hole who takes joy from others people's suffering. And he's also my favorite character in the third book. This decision is also based upon how much I hate Zhen by the end of the story. Also, Big Shu, best character in the whole trilogy, he's nowhere to be found in the third book. He died off screen in one of the many time jumps in this series. I would like to take this moment as a moment of silence for Big Shu being the best character in this whole entire story. Anyways, Wade at the beginning of the story is just an absolute slime ball who does whatever is necessary to advance. Advance at all costs is his motto for some reason. I'm sure in Mandarin it probably sounds cooler and way more epic, but, in English it just kind of sounds a little cheesy. Especially when coming from a psycho like Wade, but it is what it is. That's my motto. Anyways, the problem of getting a human to 1% the speed of light remains the same problem today, tomorrow, and for, the rest of the time when it comes to spaceflight. Big mass takes big thrust. So chemical rockets, definitely off the table. But Wade yells, "Advance, advance," at his office full of science nerds enough to make them come to a solution. I know I've used the term spaceboat as a funny term, but they actually make a space sailboat. Like, it's just a probe attached to a sail. Now, this is actually a design, that we are looking at in real life now, but we don't have time. This video has been going on for too long, and you are not, I repeat, you're not listening fast enough. You know this. Fix yourself. Alright, so they have their space sailboat design, and the plan is to use a series of nuclear detonations in space to propel the probe out of the solar system. Want to know where all the bombs come from? If you guessed it's from that psychopath Ray Diaz stockpile, then kiss your brain, because there are still thousands of those. The problem, however, still remains. The probe has to be incredibly light, and they have to make all these reductions to as many things as possible to where the pilot has to make some weight reductions themselves. How much weight? All of it, except for the brain. So their plan is now to launch a space sailboat at the Trisolaren invasion fleet with a frozen human brain, with the hopes that the Trisolarans will clone it and that clone will somehow help humanity afterwards. What? Alright, so unfortunately, they have a similar problem than Frederick Tyler had with his like kamikaze drones. Who is going to want to launch themselves in their, or just not even themselves? Who wants to launch their brain out into space? All right. Also, the candidate has to be kind of smart and know a bit about propulsion technology and blah, 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 blah. So that's when they get the idea of legalizing euthanasia. This plan has no faults and is foolproof. Well, anyways, this is how they find Tian Ming, and Jin is the one that tells the project committee that he would be perfect for it. Also, around this time, she gets her star, and she thinks it's such a romantic gift, and blah, blah, blah. But when she asks Tian Ming to be her flying brain boy, he has an inner monologue about how terrible this all sounds. And I'm just shouting, Tian Ming, my man, don't do it. Don't do this to yourself. You have more self-worth than this, my man. And he just says to her, yeah, I'll do it, because he's a frickin' whipped beta boy. Come on, man, come on. Well, Jin feels terrible about sending this poor guy into space as a flying brain, but now that he's about to undergo his massive Ozempic weight loss procedure, and Wade decides to do the funniest thing ever. He tells Jin that Tian Ming gave her the star. What a psychopath. Also, the cherry on top of all of it is at the very last moment, something happens to the probe and it gets launched off course. It's a total failure, but they decide to send Jin into the future because she's been very resourceful in this project and might be of use in the future. And this is the decision that doomed humanity. Alright, so let's fast forward roughly 260 years to the Deterrence era. So this is after Luoji forced the Trisolarans to abandon their invasion by threatening to dox their location to the galaxy. So here's what's going on. So Luoji now has a new position as something called the Sword Holder. Basically, he lives underground with a button that would transmit the locations of Earth and Trisolaris via a network of gravitational wave antennas that are, in different locations around the Earth and also aboard a new ship called Gravity. Also, society is quite different now. Since peace has been established, both Earth and Trisolaris have been exchanging culture, and people tend to think of Trisolaris not as evil space aliens, but just as an unfortunate species that were just doing what it had to do because their three sons, kind of made their world suck. Also, for some reason, there are only women and femboys in this future society. Yet again, I must inform you that this is not hyperbole. Anyways, peace has made humanity soft or feminine and is now full of all these social justice warriors trying to find bad men. And you know who the bad men are now? Well, it's those renegade spaceships, Blue Space, and that other one I forgot the name of. That one that was in the Doomsday Battle. What was it called? Bronze Age. There's a ship in the story called Bronze Age. I think it's Bronze Age. Editor, flash name on screen. Is it the Bronze Age? Yeah? Did I do good? Okay. Anyways, those guys are traitors to humanity because they didn't die heroically in the Doomsday Battle or, something, Blue Space. They had their reasons. Anyways, they don't hail them that. They hail them as heroes because they just did what had to be done. And they tell them, hey, guys, that's all right. You can come home now because the war is over and the Trisolarans are chill now. Totally, we promise. Well, the Bronze Age, if that's the name of the ship, decides to turn around and come home. But Blue Space just leaves the messages on red. So anyways, they decide to send their big gravitational antenna ship Gravity after Blue Space, along with a couple of those Trisolaran teardrop probes. Because now there's more of those around. Yay. Anyways, when Bronze Age finally returns to Earth, they are immediately arrested and tried for crimes against humanity. What a cheap trick. Like, come on. Anyways, the crew of the Bronze Age is pretty bummed, but they tell them the reality of what happened. When they decided to blow up the other human ship, whose name I'm definitely not going to remember after that Doomsday Battle, it was because they did not have enough space parts, fuel, or supplies for both ships to make it to another star system. And going back to get destroyed by the droplets from Trisolaris didn't seem like a great idea either. Also, when asked what they did with the bodies of the crew of the other ship, well, they said they didn't waste anything. including protein, which humans so happen to be partly made of. Turns out the whole cosmic sociology thing gets pretty dark. In a final act of defiance, a member of the Bronze Age sends a message to Blue Space saying that returning is a trap and that they should continue on, and from this point, Blue Space cuts off all contact with the Earth. Good for those guys. Okay, so there's one more person these social justice warrior femboys are after. Luo Ji, our boy. So remember the spell he placed on a star that got the star exploded by a genocidal alien race? Well, they start to wonder, what if the planets around that star had life on it? Did Luo Ji just cause a civilization to just get murderized and a dark forest strike? It's all just a bunch of what ifs, but apparently because this society is more empathetic and feminine, it's actual concern. And for the most part, people in general just don't like Luo Ji anymore because he represents this relic from a wartime past as this masculine anti-hero who doesn't deserve praise. I mean, come on, it's not like he literally saved the Earth from invasion or anything. Also, just one moment, okay? Depicting Luo Ji, the man who started this out as with a story of an S-rated imaginary girlfriend, okay, as being a hero who is masculine, is one of the funniest things in this entire series. And the only reason I bring this up, the whole masculine versus feminine thing, is because the third book, Death's End, seems to really emphasize this for some reason. It does come across as some sort of like speculative social commentary about some possible future societies, but it kind of comes off as weird because it kind of swings hard one way and the other, and we're just giving extreme examples of either. But I'm just going to use it to make jokes, okay? Stick with me here. Also, some of this stuff is probably just like cultural stuff and things lost in translation. So, there's that too, but Luo Ji being masculine will never not be funny to me. And I just decided to expound on this just a little bit because it's not like Luo Ji couldn't grow as a character to become more, let's say, masculine. But this book series really isn't about characters or character growth. It's about the interesting sci-fi concepts that are, terrifying. So when this book frames him as masculine, it's not because he's done anything other than save humanity with like a dead man switch, okay? It's just that society went so far the other way that he seems masculine, but the story doesn't really frame it well, I think. Anyways, want to know something else funny? Luo Ji finally got his wife out of cryo since he saved the world and all that, and she left him because she thinks he's a monster for possibly killing another species. Incredible. Okay, so at this point, our new main protagonist enters the story once again, Jin. So apparently her star had some planets around it, and the UN didn't know it when they sold it to her, or to Tianming, who gave it to her. And now they want to buy the star back because it could possibly be valuable to humanity in the future. Well, anyways, Jin doesn't want to sell her star, but she's okay with selling the planets. So she sells the rights of the planets for a small fortune, and now she's rich. So along with her new friend AA, yes, that's her name because Cixin Liu was trying to make names in the future sound cool. So anyways, they start a new company called the Halo Company that's really good at building stuff in space, and eventually, as the story goes on, the company gets bigger and bigger each time skip and makes stacks of cash. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Also, she has a meeting with Sofon, a Trisolarian humanoid robot obsessed with making tea that acts as an ambassador to the Trisolarians. She is also very feminine, and people love her for some reason because she's beautiful and kind and blah, 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 blah. She's a robot, guys. Society of this time is just in love with Jin because she's super feminine and caring and all that gross stuff. And she is submitted as a candidate to become the new sword holder because Luo Ji is old as heck at this point. It seems to everyone that she is also the likely candidate to succeed Luo Ji as well, because all the other candidates are just a bunch of grumpy old men, which also includes our favorite psychopath, Thomas Wade. Yes, Thomas Wade is back and out of hibernation to assume the role of sword holder, because naturally he would, of course. But before the election takes place, he lures Jin into a trap where he tries to kill her, but is unsuccessful and gets instead his arm blasted off by a policeman. Wade afterwards is unapologetic because he knows he has what it takes to be humanity's sword holder, and Jin is too weak and soft for the job, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Jin is of course elected the new sword holder, and as soon as Luo Ji hands off the transmitter, he doesn't so much as get out the door and gets arrested for suspected, possible, maybe unsure crimes of alien genocide, because of course they would. So a solid 10 minutes pass where Jin is trying to figure out how to redo the decor in Luo Ji's old man cave bunker, and the world comes crashing down. It took 10 whole minutes for the Trisolarans to decide to make a move. So in comes swooshing from different parts of the solar system a bunch of Trisolaran droplets, all aimed for humanity's gravitational wave antennas, and Jin has minutes to respond to the attack. All she has to do is press the button and send the broadcast. But one after another, the antennas are destroyed until none are left. Jin ultimately couldn't press the button that would doom both races. All I can say is, well, duh. And it's not because she's a woman, it's because the story builds her up as this sympathetic, motherly figure who just wants to preserve life and beauty, and that's great and all, but do you think someone like that really needs all the responsibility of safeguarding humanity from an alien invasion with a doomsday button? Literally, anyone else would have been a better choice, I think. And again, it's the speculative future society that places Jin on this pedestal that pushed her to become the sword holder. But I mean, come on. So things are about to get really, 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 really bad. Really fast. So the Trisolarans are pretty much victorious at this point. And wouldn't you know, they have another invasion fleet heading for Earth again. And this time they have full light speed engines. But it's not like humanity has time to scheme anymore, because now there are a bunch of these droplets hanging around, and now Sophon, you know, the Trisolaran robot lady, and she has come forward with a katana and some demands. Also, when I say katana, I am not being metaphorical. She has a literal katana. Anyways, she says that Trisolaris has changed their minds about eradicating humanity, but they all have to resettle to Australia. All 4.3 billion of them. And they only have like a year? 2 years? I don't remember the exact time. Not enough time. At first, no one does anything until a droplet starts wrecking a major city, killing thousands. Sophon gets back on the horn and says, hey, I wasn't joking. Get your stuff and get to Australia. So the mass migration starts, and it's a mess because they also can't use any kind of like heavy equipment or anything like that. And Australia just doesn't have the infrastructure, you know, to handle the whole world's population, 3.3 billion people. So there's mass riots. Several cities in Australia are destroyed by refugees, but, you know, eventually everyone is relocated, or, you know, most everyone. There is a group of freedom fighters still out there, but, you know, no one really cares about them. The book doesn't really care about them either. It just kind of tells you they exist, but we don't really know about what they do, what they did, or getting any type of narration or perspective on them. Just that they exist. Yeah, that's about it. So Jin is mega bummed about everything and takes up a living with a cool old Aboriginal person who embodies the spirit of it is what it is. And of course, AA is still there as well, but the society that put her in charge now hate her. Like, of course she wasn't going to push the button. It's y'all's fault for making her the sword holder. The swings of society in this series really kind of just gives you whiplash. Oh, and Thomas Wade is still around. And for some reason he refuses to get a replacement arm because of pride or something. I don't know. I think the story is trying to say something with it, like he's a man of some kind of principle, but I really don't get it. Anyways, after this resettlement, Sophon makes her big announcement. For 3 months, humanity will have to survive without technology of any kind. which means they won't have the ability to synthesize food. And Australia isn't particularly known for having fields of food. When someone asks Sofan what they are supposed to do without food, she simply states, "Food. Everyone, look around you. You are surrounded by food. Living food." Okay, so we all know what that means, yeah? Cannibalism, that's right. Good job. Ah, kiss your brain again. Now, if we were just to remove those last two words, living food, so if it would have just been food, everyone look around you, you're surrounded by food, that would have given us one of the hardest sentences in modern literary fiction. However, we are now left with a cheesy one-liner. Great. Again, it's translated from Mandarin, so it could be something to do with that, but unfortunately it is what it is. So mayhem grasps the reign and humanity's last feast begins. Oh hey, remember the space boat named Gravity? The one that has a gravitational wave antenna that's supposed to catch blue space? Let's check up on those guys and see what's going on. Alright, so Gravity has been trailing blue space for a while now, and it was able to catch up because it has more fuel and all that. But remember, there were also two droplets following Gravity. So what happened when the droplets attacked Earth? Well, the droplets also began their attack on both Gravity and blue space. However, something strange happened. A few supporting vessels from blue space were able to swat the droplets away like they were nothing. But how? Remember, the technology that built the droplets made them near indestructible. Well, turns out that both blue space and Gravity have been traveling beside a shard of 4D space, four-dimensional space. So it turns out that the universe used to be composed of up to 11 dimensions, but have to gauge to the three-dimensional universe we have now. But there still exist these decaying shards of 4D space just traveling through space. And blue space was able to utilize this 4D shard to disable the droplets. Now, I'm going to explain this very poorly, but the people aboard blue space were able to travel into these 4D shards and then have strange interactions with other three-dimensional objects, such as the droplets or the ship Gravity. Basically, they could look at a 3D or like a three-dimensional object and observe and interact with every component of a three-dimensional object. So remember how the story began with a prostitute witch in Constantinople that was able to extract that person's brain without cutting open their head? Well, that's because she traveled through one of these four-dimensional shards that just so happened to be passing over the Earth at the time. In the fourth dimension, she just reached in this guy's head and took out his brain and then scooted on back to the third dimension. So the crew of Blue Space did the same thing to the droplets, basically, and they were also able to infiltrate the ship Gravity. So after the droplet attacks, the crews of both ships know that Earth is under attack and that there is only one thing left to do: initiate the broadcast and save themselves as the last remnant of humanity, and ultimately doom both Earth and Trisolaris. Now, the crew of both Blue Space and Gravity go on and learn a few interesting bits of lore from the fourth dimensional space shard, and there's like this weird four-dimensional spaceship in it. But I think I'm going to save that for like a separate video because it's a little dense and we really don't have time for it in this video. What I do want to say is that it's probably some of my favorite bits from this entire trilogy. However, this is in fact an inaccurate summary of the Three Body Problem series. And wouldn't you just look at the time in the video? Would you look at it there? It's still quite a bit of video left and we are nearing where I crashed out, so you gotta listen faster. We don't have time for everything now. Okay, so we will say bon voyage to Blue Space and Gravity for now. Thank you for your service. Go forth and prosper and all that other fun stuff. Let's get back to Earth now that the broadcast has been initiated. Okay, so Sofan tells humanity that Gravity initiated the broadcast. And now the invasion of Earth has now been canceled. And everyone cheers. Woo, yay! Now we don't have to cannibalize everyone now anymore. Yay! Except not yay. Remember, the galaxy is a dark forest, and now the Earth and Trisolaris' addresses have been doxed. And well, now it's just a waiting game until someone blows up their suns and everyone dies. At least they do have a bit of time, because it did take them at least 100 years to observe the destruction of the star Luoji cast a spell on. It's here that we get an interesting interaction, however. Okay, so Sofan, the killer Trisolaran robot, shows respect towards Luoji and Jin by allowing them to get an answer to one question. Luoji, since he is a master of cosmic sociology, asks, is there a way to send a cosmic safety notice? Remember, in the dark forest of the universe, anything that reveals the location of intelligent life causes it to be a target. So what if there's something that shows that they are safe? And Sofan answers yes, and then tells Jin that someone would like to see her. Tian Ming. That's right. Our ultra-romantic star bequeather and fedora tipper ultra simp is back from the dead and ready for love. So it turns out, even though the staircase probe that launched Tian Ming's brain out into the black space of nothing in the wrong direction, well, the Trisolarans still went out of their way to grab it. Why? Well, I'm pretty sure they probably learned a lot about human psychology and biology from him that allowed them to, enact, their nefarious British Prison Colony 2.0 Electric Boogaloo edition. But as it turns out, the Trisolarans are huge sympathizers, and they can't help but love this guy. Well, anyways, they are willing to let Shin and Tian Ming have their date with Destiny over an intergalactic Zoom call. Small caveat, they can't talk about anything like Trisolaran technology, biology, theoretical light speed propulsion systems, the ending to Game of Thrones, the number 42, or some total mass of all mothers in the galaxy. So they play with this weird game of red light, green light, where if they lose, someone blows up. Fun and very romantic. Anyways, Tian Ming and Shin are able to use their human wits of deception to still talk about things using coded fairy tales. The Trisolarans by this point kind of figured out humanity's ability of deception, but metaphor and allegory, I guess, was still a little bit of a challenge. But it is what it is. So Tian Ming tells 3 fairy tales that contain everything needed to snoop out what they need to know. Kinda. Oh, and then they promise to meet at her star someday. So sweet. Also, it turns out that the coded fairy tales were too well coded, because it took humanity years to figure it out as well, and they still screwed it up. Look, the fairy tales, they're in the book, okay? It's 3 whole chapters of the book, but I'm not going to summarize it now because I just really don't want to. It's interesting how it works, but I was so bored reading the fairy tales. Like, 1 chapter of fairy tales would have been good, but 3, at this point, I just wanted the story to progress, which, I mean, look, we're getting very, very, very close to my crash out. Like, all of this stuff that's happened up to this point felt bad, and I was kind of, annoyed with some of the things, but, I was still forgiving at this point, and now it's just, in hindsight, it's like, all right, so Jin and other super important people spend a lot of time trying to figure out these fairy tales and what they mean. And they eventually stumble into the galactic safety measure they call a black domain. So what is a black domain? Basically, it involves reducing the speed of light in an area to 0, creating a zone where nothing can come in and out, including light. So it would tell any aggressor or alien species that they're harmless. They can't do anything. They can't move. And also, the stars look wicked weird at night. All right, that's cool, but one problem. How the heck are we supposed to reduce the speed of light? Seems mega complicated, doesn't it? So humanity just hits the easy button and comes up with a different plan. They call the Bunker Project, and they say, good enough. Here's the fun part about how they came up with the idea of the Bunker Project, though. Are you ready? They get the data by watching Trisolaris' sun get blown up. Get wrecked, alien scum. So yeah, it only took 3 years for Trisolaris to get blown up. This gave humanity a lot of data, and remember, Trisolaris is a 3-star system. And they noticed that a spaceship actually survived the blast of not being blown up by hiding behind one of the suns. So humanity thinks, yes, we've got these big gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn. All we got to do is hide behind them in big space stations, and bing, bang, boom, Bob's your uncle. We got this, right? We can survive this. So anyways, they all decide that this is the best plan of action, and Jin decides to go down for a nap in the fridge, but before she does, Thomas Wade tells her to give her or him everything she owns, aka the Halo Group, the big construction company, which this at this point is making money hand over fist. The reason he wants her company is so that he can pursue light speed technology, because they both know that relying on this bunker plan only is foolish. Also, remember how the UN made escapism or trying to colonize another star system illegal? Well, it's still illegal. Why? There is literally a ticking clock on how long it will take for an alien bomb to come and blow everything up. Okay, like the UN in real life kind of does things that irritates me, okay? Because, it's a bureaucratic mess sometimes, just like every government. But the fictional UN in the Three Body Problem series makes me want to commit a war crime. Anyways, Jin agrees to this on one condition. Wade can't do anything that could even possibly harm humanity in any way. So initially, Wade refuses, but after some thought, he decides to commit to this oath. Because remember, at this point, he's punished Wade. He doesn't have any resources for a project like this, and he still doesn't have a replacement arm because the story is trying to tell us that he's some kind of man of principle at this point. A man that was quite literally willing to kill Jin only a few chapters ago. Guys, we are so close. My anger is palpable. Okay, so a few decades pass, and Shen is then yanked out of the ice tray and sent on a tour of all these fancy new space stations humanity has built for this bunker project. There are circular stations, boat stations, tubular stations, hobo stations, and even a station that has a black hole in it. For some reason, there's like a whole chapter on it. I'm still trying to figure out why it's there. Also, apparently femboys have begun to disappear from the gene pool. So the femboy cycle is a canon event for the Three Body Problem series. I will never not find this funny. So anyways, we spend several chapters going around the space stations until we reach Thomas Wade. Also, I got to backtrack just this skosh because I also forgot a plot detail that was a little bit important earlier. But Jin and her friend discovered the secret to light speed before she went down for that nap. And they did this by putting a paper boat in a bubble bath. Look, it has to do with Tien Ming's fairy tales and soap, but I don't have time, yada yada. The secret to light speed propulsion is something called curvature propulsion. So anyways, Wade was researching this curvature propulsion, and when Jin arrives, he shows her a prototype that is just large enough to move his Warhammer figurines across the table. Jin, of course, is very impressed that it works and that Wade is so good at edge highlighting his Chaos Space Marines. But there's a problem. You see, the UN is onto them because, remember, escapism. It's illegal. Big no-no. And so is lightspeed research. For some reason. Wade, however, has a plan and a group of real-life Chaos Space Marines ready to enact his plan at a moment's notice. So part of his research involved antimatter. Little real world tangent here, antimatter is actually something that exists, but currently in the real world, it's kind of hard to make, and we can only make itty bitty amounts of it in particle accelerators, and it's hard to store because it's almost like it just doesn't want to exist in the first place. This is science fiction, so let's just make a solar system spanning particle accelerator. So anyways, they have their massive particle accelerator, making decent quantities of antimatter that they use to make space bullets capable of obliterating anything, the Space Force has or the UN space stations. And then they've also got their Space Marines out and about and everywhere ready to enact some chaos if the UN tries to arrest Wade and the Halo Group for their lightspeed research. So, this is a pivotal moment. Chrysolaris has already been sun-nuked, and humanity is on borrowed time before their sun, gets borked. What does Jin have to say? No. And not only no, but turn yourselves and all the antimatter bullets in no. Okay. So, I think most people can see this and understand that it is phenomenally stupid. Like, at this point, you probably don't want to go around nuking the UN. Probably. We were talking about the fate of humanity. Billions of people. Like, just engage in negotiations or secede from the UN or something. It's not like they can do anything anyways. The Halo group has their own stuff to be self-sufficient at this point. But no, Shin can't possibly conceive of something so monstrous as antimatter bullets even existing. It's a crime against humanity, and the memory of the untainted, pure humanity is more important than its survival. I mean, it's not like humanity didn't already go through a cannibal purge a few decades prior. No, this is way worse than that. Alright, so Jin, she's lost the plot. It's insane that she's got all this main character energy in the final book and finds herself amidst the most important moments of mankind's existence, making decisions. But we've still got our psychopathic anti-hero Thomas Wade, and this is all here just to serve as dramatic and possibly violent transition into the stars. Right? He's just going to tell Jin to suck an egg and watch him single-handedly save the human race, right? Nope. He just rolls over and says, all right, you win. I guess it's your company after all. You're the boss, applesauce. What? What? This is the man that enjoyed seeing people suffer. This man told her about Tian Ming buying her the star right after he got his brain yanked out and yeeted into space because it was funny. This man attempted to kill Jin just so that he would have a chance to hold the shiny red sword holder button, and now he's giving up because the story is trying to say he's some kind of man with some principle because he refused to get a robot arm and now he's kind of old. What? Yeah, so here is the crash out. I just could not believe this, okay? So this whole story over 3 books just keeps building the stakes, and humanity's future is left up to this woman who dislikes hurting people because she's just too darn empathetic, and who also already failed humanity as the sword holder, causing a catastrophic loss of life that of course led to the Cannibal Island story arc in Australia, and then the guy who has constantly embodied the ethos of the ends justifies the means, advance, just decides this is where he wants to grow a conscience. Unbelievable. Okay, so at this point, however, I have already read like 1,300 pages worth of book. So I decided to just stick it out for another 100 pages or so. So I could just get to the ending. Maybe something happens that turns it around. Who knows? It's so much worse than you could possibly imagine. All right, I had to go take a break. I'm sorry. It's still the same day. We haven't entered day 3 yet. We are getting close, though. All right, so Little Miss Empathy decides to go back to cryosleep and wait for the eventual doomsday. And Wade's actions are apparently so vile that they revive the death penalty just for him and vaporize him with a laser. Yay. Now we transition to the perspective of an alien. All right, cool. I'm done reading about humans at this point. All right, so we get the perspective of an alien named Singer, because apparently he likes to sing. And Singer has noticed Tri-Solaris and Earth's little communication exchange. Well, Singer has a job that isn't highly regarded by his species. What's his job, you may ask? Intergalactic genocide. But to his species, he's more of just like an exterminator or something like that. Protocol dictates that it is now his job to exterminate the problem, but looks like someone has already took care of Tri-Solaris for him. But these star pluckers, as he calls the humans, well, they've got these blind spots in their solar system. So just blowing up the star isn't going to squash this infestation. He needs a different solution. A weapon called the dual vector foil. He actually needs authorization to use the dual vector foil because it turns out it's actually pretty bad for the environment, and he ruminates a bit on the damage it's caused. Singer, you see, misses the values and history of his own species because now they got this pretty nasty civil war going on around, and his homeworld has actually made the decision to transition from the 3rd dimension down to the 2nd dimension. This causes Singer great sadness, but the request to use the dual vector foil is granted, and he just flings out the weapon towards our solar system. It looks just like a simple sheet of paper. Alright, so another decent amount of time passes, and Jin is awakened from cryosleep because an object has entered the solar system that looks like a slip of paper. So, this whole time, humanity has been looking for photoid like objects to come into the system and blow up the sun. But everyone is pretty cautious of this flying paper object, so they send a crew to intercept it. Meanwhile, Jin is picked up by her shiny new space yacht and sent to Pluto on a mission given to her by the UN or PDC or something. I can't remember. It's space UN basically. So eventually, the space paper or the dual vector foil reaches its destination, but there's no explosion or anything like that. It starts to spread and it begins to reduce our three-dimensional solar system into just two dimensions. Everyone looks on in horror as it reduces people, spaceships, and entire planets into two-dimensional pictures of death. All of humanity's work building these Jovian bunkers for decades is reduced to nothing in the face of a weapon whose power they could have just never dreamed of. Well, actually, Hian Ming did warn them about this in the fairy tales by making the antagonist a villain who paints his victims into pictures and then they die. But how are they supposed to figure that one out, really? So now, at the very end of humanity as they know it, the Space UN makes escapism legal. The unfortunate part is that the escape velocity required to get away from the 2D plane of death is light speed. Good job, Space UN. Fortunately for Jin and her best gal AA, they've still got some time at least, and the weapon doesn't spread at the speed of light, so they decide to still go to Pluto. Their whole mission to Pluto is just to gather like remnants of human artifacts and scatter them about in space so that something remains of humanity. A whole lot of good that will do, but I guess it's something to do while you wait to get flattened by a high-tech hydraulic press. Anyways, turns out that Pluto is just a giant museum of human artifacts at this point that was just designed to last as long as possible. And guess who's there? Luoji, that old bastard, is still alive. So they reminisce with old Luoji, and he starts throwing old oil paintings and artifacts at them in the spaceship. What's strange is that the spaceship's AI also recognizes Luoji. Weird, huh? Well, anyways, my favorite bit about this whole interaction is that it comes up that Jin feels kind of bad about making the wrong decision about Wade because it cost humanity decades of research and time to be able to build lightspeed ships that could have probably saved them from this vector foil weapon. And then Luoji just gives her the Omega stare of truth that says, duh? Either way, he's too old to hold on the grudges for some reason, and he waves goodbye and tells them to jump in their spaceship and finish the mission. And my crash out continues. They get on the ship, and lo and behold, it has light speed capabilities that Luoji built in secret. The character that made the mistake of not having the gumption to make the hard decisions to save mankind not once, but twice, gets to save her lives while billions of people get squashed like a pancake. Unreal. Okay, so we are almost there. We're almost there. Just a few more chapters. Okay. Jin and AA decide that now they have light speed capabilities, so they might as well go visit her star since they don't really have anywhere else important to go. Since, humanity got squashed into a bleeding Polaroid. So they go to this star system, and there are two planets orbiting this star that they call Planet Gray and Planet Blue. Great names, good job. So they go to Planet Blue, and there's a human signal coming from the planet. They land and meet Guan Yifan. Actually, I think it's Yifan. Anyways, he's a scientist from blue space. So it turns out that gravity and blue space were able to actually find a new home amongst the stars and started to colonize several different planets. And even developed their own light speed engines and technology to create their own black domains to protect themselves if the need ever arose. So I'm still pretty bummed about, everything's happened so far, but at least humanity made it so far. Yeah, that's good, I guess. Alright, so Planet Blue is actually very habitable for humans. The problem, however, is that the star system is in a high traffic area for alien spaceships. So, probably not the best spot for a colony. Lo and behold, while they are on planet Blue, they actually pick up some weird signals from planet Gray. Looks like they have some visitors. So Yifan and Jin decide to go scope it out on Yifan's tiny ship. When they arrive, there is no sign of the spacecraft. However, there is a strange anomaly that extends from the surface of the planet off into space. Yifan calls them death lines. So why are they called death lines? Well, anything that enters into a death line has its speed reduced to 0, including light. So anything that enters it might as well be dead. Remember earlier when we talked about the black domains being like the intergalactic version of a safety notice? Well, this is kind of how they are made. So anyways, Yifan is pretty spooked by this and says that they better be careful so that nothing disrupts the death lines. Because apparently things like light speed engines can just cause them to rupture and make a bad time for everyone involved. Around this time, they get a call from AA, who says they've got a guest bearing gifts on planet Blue, and it's not Santa Claus. It's Tian Ming, proving once and for all that the wildest romantic incel daydream, while being statistically low, is never 0. Jin, of course, is thrilled by this, and they decide it is best to just kind of head back. But once they reach planet Blue, something happens. Turns out that this statistically improbable plot point of people all showing up at this star around the same time has set off another plot point. Tian Ming's light speed engines ruptured the death lines, but he was able to make it to the planet. However, Yifan and Jin are unfortunately stuck in the orbit of planet Blue. So they get stuck in this gravitational anomaly where their ship has lost power and it's stuck in this wide orbit around planet Blue. And it's orbiting really, really fast, like several orbits per second. So Yifan activates their backup power system, which the way it works is actually kind of cool. But, you know, at this point, I don't really care to like go over how all that stuff's worked. Anyways, it takes a while to boot up, like a couple of weeks or something like that. But anyways, after it boots up, they're able to land on planet Blue. But planet Blue isn't actually blue anymore. The gravity anomaly had them stuck in orbit for millions of years. Both AA and Tian Ming are nothing but dust. Jin, of course, is devastated because, well, now her best friend and not-so-secret incel Valentine are long dead. And you know what? It's not like Jin really deserves a happy ending. As a reader, you just kind of expect it to happen, though. But here, our expectations get subverted. Good. This whole story isn't really happy, so no need for a happy ending like that, right? Okay, so Jin and Yifan search for clues that Tian Ming and AA may have left behind, and lo and behold, they leave a message etched into the bedrock that tells them not to worry, they lived happy lives, blah, blah, blah. So Tian Ming wasn't able to make it with Jin, but at least he made it with AA, I guess. So now we're left with just Yifan and Jin. Oh, what's that? Another incoming plot device. So Tian Ming's gift shows up, and it's a portal to a pocket dimension outside of our reality. Inside there is this farm tended by robots and a cute little house and a fake sky and all that jazz. Oh, and Sofon the Trisolarian murderbot is there too, but here she's nice, I guess. So it turns out this is a gift from the remnants of the Trisolarian civilization to Tian Ming and Jin, and time passes differently inside this pocket dimension. The idea is that they would be able to live inside this pocket dimension and live to see the end and rebirth of the universe. So basically, like the Big Crunch and the Big Bang are canon events in this story universe. So you all know what the Big Bang is, you know, all matter the size of a pinhead explodes and becomes a universe. And the Big Crunch is just being like, you know, a gravitational, everything draws back into that same point, and it's just a cycle that repeats. The twist, however, in the three-body problem universe is that there used to be more dimensions of reality other than just 3 and 4 dimensions. So by going into the next universe, they would be able to experience these higher dimensions. And all they got to do is chill out for a year or so in the TARDIS to reach this point in time. So Yinfan and Jin play house for a while and they decide they want to see the next universe. But oh, what's this? A transmission from outside the pocket dimension from another alien race that calls themselves the Returners. What could they possibly want? Well, it turns out that the universe is full of other aliens that also discovered the whole separate dimension hack to survive into the birth of the next universe. And the pocket universes are fine, but all the stuff they took from the universe into the pocket universes, well, that's actually pretty problematic, because now that the universe is missing a significant chunk of its mass, instead of doing the big crunch and rebirth thing, we're just going to get a big tear, and the universe is going to do the whole heat death thing instead. So that means no rebirth, ergo death's end. So the only way to fix it is to throw out all the stuff in the pocket dimension into the universe itself so it can restart itself. So Yinfan and Jin decide that they have played house long enough and they wish to return their pocket universe's stuff to the original universe so that the cycle can continue. They find a peaceful enough spot in time and then disembark from this pocket universe. And here we reach the end of the series. And based on the musings of Jin and Yinfan, it can be interpreted as somewhat of a hopeful ending because humanity has made it this far. All right, so the first book, The Three-Body Problem, I liked it. I thought it had a very strong beginning, and it's not like a master class of characters, but it had big shus, so it was good enough to get me invested. And the reveal of this impending invasion was really cool. The Dark Forest, the second book, I think I agree with most everyone to say that's probably my favorite. It's got a good mix of perspectives, and the reveal of the Dark Forest theory is genuinely very disturbing, I think. Also, the Wallbreaker stories, is entertaining enough, even if they did get a bit goofy sometimes. Looking at you, Mosquito Swarm. Okay. Now that's in. I absolutely despise Jin. That's all I can say. I've already talked about it. You've heard it. There are a few characters I can really recall, that get two monumental decisions like this and totally screw them up and then get to have a happy-ish ending. Billions died. There's some cool stuff in the book, however. If someone were to come up and ask me if this series was worth reading, all I could say is, yeah, it's pretty good.